Good morning, and I want to welcome everyone joining us again for our service online today. Let me just remind you that you can join us on Zoom. We're in Central Time here in Springfield, Missouri, so I do one Zoom on Wednesday at 9 a.m. and the other at 5 p.m., so it's coffee hour or happy hour, depending upon which time zone you're in and what your preference of beverage is. So if you want to get the link to that, just send that to me, please. Also, while we are selling this building and we'll be vacating here in the next month or so, we are going to continue to post sermons while we are in full lockdown, and we'll hope to return to seated services after there's a vaccine. But our expenses go on, but our giving has dropped off pretty dramatically. Like today, I think of the donations we've received for this week was about a fourth of what it costs us to operate. So if you possibly can support us, please do. We have moved our mailing address to a post office box, so we'll have that on screen for those of you that need to get that new address, but we appreciate your support. Let's join together now in this meditation. We confess that while we have grown beyond much of the symbol and sacrament of traditional religion, we have too often embraced the sacredness of the status quo without ever wondering why. Though we live in a culture cursed with the problem of finding places to store or dispose of all of our stuff, and where we throw away almost as much food as we eat, still we seem helpless in the face of poverty. Of course, we are not helpless, which leaves us looking for other, more plausible excuses. Together, we seek to grow beyond the desire for excuses so that we may become solutions.
My mother told me before she passed away, she said, "Son, when I'm gone, don't forget to pray, 'cause there'll be hard times, hard times. Who knows better than I?" Then I soon found out just what she meant when I had to pawn my clothes just to pay my rent. I'm talking about hard times, oh yeah. And who knows better than I? I had a woman, Lord, who was always around, but when I lost my money, she done put me down, talking about hard times. You know those hard times, Lord, who knows better than I? Yeah, Lord, yeah, one of these days there'll be no more sorrow when I pass away, and no more hard times. I see no more hard times, and who knows better than life.
Our wisdom lesson this morning is from Gene Bauer, president and co-founder of Farm Sanctuary from the New York Times. What we eat is one of our most important decisions every day. Our food can either promote health or it can make us sick. Agriculture can contribute to vibrant, healthy communities, or it can undermine them. Farmers can use scarce natural resources responsibly, or they can squander and deplete them. Unfortunately, American farm policies have enabled a harmful system to take root. It doesn't have to be this way. As consumers become more concerned about our broken food system, they are voting with their dollars. There is growing demand for organic produce, and farmers' markets are spreading, along with community gardens.
This song is called Let's Eat the Poor by Alan Ross Haynes. The poor are such a nuisance. Tell me, what good are they? Everything comes down to money, and they don't pay their way. Jonathan Swift proposed it. I'm just saying what he said before. Think of the money we can save if we eat the poor. Let's eat the poor. Let's feed the people, people. It solves many problems, and it can't be done any cheaper. Let's eat the poor. The young ones, they taste the best. Then let's say those magic words. It will cost the taxpayers less. They didn't prepare themselves, so we will prepare them now. You can't prepare the poor just like you do a cow. Flanks are for roast and steaks. Ribs are good on the grill. Their livers are great with onions, but their hearts are much better still. Ooh. Let's eat the poor. Let's feed the people, people. It solves many problems, and it can't be done any cheaper. Let's eat the poor. The young ones, they taste the best. And let's say those magic words. It will cost the taxpayers less. It's their fault if they're poor. They should have worked harder. We can eat the young ones now, or save them for cannon fodder. Let's eat the poor. Woo! Let's feed the people, people. It solves many problems, and it just can't be done any cheaper. So let's eat the poor. The young ones, they taste the best. Then let's say those magic words. It will cost the taxpayers, cost the taxpayers, cost the taxpayers less. That's right. We're all done here.
This is what my breakfast plate often looks like. I love having fruit for breakfast, and I have a special fondness for melons and strawberries. I love it so much that if I don't have it for breakfast, a lot of times I'll have it for lunch or dinner. But as commonplace as this may look to you and to me, my grandparents would have never seen a plate like this. In fact, they went to their graves believing that such a thing would not have even been possible. But do you know why? Because strawberries grow in the spring, and watermelon and cantaloupe come in late summer. When I was young, local grocery stores would advertise on billboards when the blueberries were in, or when peaches were ripe, or when the apple harvest had started. But now, if Starbucks didn't find a season of the year to put pumpkin in coffee, a violation of nature, it should be said. We would have no sense that there were any growing seasons left at all. My grandparents were farmers. My parents grew, canned, and froze most of the vegetables that we ate year-round. I'm afraid that I have now reduced my family's agricultural heritage to a purely symbolic backyard garden that produces just the tiniest fraction of the food that I eat. And my fear is that even if she wanted to keep up the family heritage, that my daughter wouldn't know which end of the tomato plant goes in the ground. While the pandemic has reacquainted many of us with that tiled room in our house where there are machines that make some things hot and other machines that keep other things cold, we are still terribly disconnected from where we get our food. I have several friends now who own chickens, and they gleefully gather and share eggs, but none of them actually eat their chickens. They give their chickens names, and eventually they come to be the proprietors of an old chicken's retirement home because they cannot imagine participating in the barbarism that makes wings and chicken tenders possible. And I'm right there with them, honestly. I'm not eager to become a vegetarian, but if I had to butcher my own meat, I would settle for a forever salad bar because I just couldn't do it. Now, if I may tax your memory and possibly test our friendship, I'll ask you to remember that last month I gave a talk about 5 things that a group of Danish scholars had published that needed to happen in a post-COVID world. One of them, and one that I promised you that I would come back to this month, was this one about agriculture, to develop a form of agriculture that is regenerative. Not so much really creating a new form of agriculture as much as it is going back to an agricultural form that was less taxing on the earth, better for the environment globally, and a lot better for our health generally. The family farms that we all grew up around usually had a combination of beef cattle and dairy cattle. They had chickens and pigs. They also grew corn and beans and potatoes, and they grew hay and alfalfa to feed the livestock. Crop rotation and being able to feed the livestock, the excesses of the agriculture of the farm, kept anything from being driven very far from where it was consumed, and it continually refreshed the earth in which it was grown. To put strawberries and watermelon on the same plate, and to do so nearly 12 months out of the year, means that we are not only not buying local produce, most of what we're getting didn't even come from this continent. 50 years ago, the only thing in our kitchens that had come from more than 1,000 miles away was our coffee and bananas. And now, and of course we don't all shop the same way or in the same places, but I would hazard a guess that most of us have less than a fraction of our fresh food from anywhere in Missouri, and that only a small percentage of what we eat comes from the United States. My nutritionist friends tell me that we should try to eat whole foods, but if we must eat packaged foods, that we should never eat anything that has more than 5 ingredients and no ingredients that you can't pronounce. But the marriage of modern farming to capitalist industries has given us even some things that are as healthy sounding as sun chips or whole wheat bread that have more than 20 ingredients in them, many of which I cannot pronounce, and at least one of which, one of the secret words, actually translates into sugar. Corporate farming has wiped out the diverse family farms in order to produce single crops as far as the eye can see of soybeans and corn and wheat and sorghum, rice or potatoes, which, when you monocrop thousands of acres at a time, requires more fertilizers, more pesticides, and more gasoline to produce and harvest it. Again, even if we reimagine the old food pyramid in this way, a lot of nutritionists that I know would not endorse even this relationship of greens, fruits, vegetables, protein, and dairy, because all the nutritionists I know want us to have almost no grains and very little dairy, much less any of the high carbohydrate root vegetables. But even still, if we should only have small servings of meat and dairy, why does the majority of our federal agricultural subsidies go to meat and dairy? If we should largely avoid grains and completely eschew sugars, why is most of the rest of the budget going to sugars? And why is less than 1%, this tiny sliver here, less than 1% of our government spending on agricultural subsidies is devoted to the green vegetables and fruits that we are supposed to eat? Now, I understand it's a complicated issue. You can't blame farmers for growing crops where they stand to gain the most profit, but you can blame the government that has allowed lobbyists and special interests to grab hundreds of billions of dollars every year to make the foods that are killing us and to make them more affordable and more easily available to us. Most of us here have volunteered at times in our local food pantry that serves the Ozarks' most food insecure families for decades. But I have to tell you, the more I've learned about nutrition and processed foods, the more guilty I've felt about my own involvement in this activity that gives the poor such a carbohydrate-rich diet that while we may be immediately preventing their hunger, we are almost certainly helping to give them cancer and type 2 diabetes. The poor tend to eat the worst foods because they eat what they can afford, and they eat what's available to them. If you look at the grocery stores in poor neighborhoods, it's almost always canned and processed foods. Anything that you can put on your shelf and eat a couple of weeks later, you probably shouldn't eat. But the poor will eat the foods that will cause health hazards that create medical bills that far exceed what it would have cost them to eat more healthy food. This exchange that we engage in, where the government subsidizes foods that cause cancer and diabetes, is absolutely insane. Now, this is a touchy topic for me. I'm obviously terribly overweight. I'd like to remind our viewers that the camera adds 15 pounds. I'll confess the other 85 pounds is pretty much all on me. In fact, one snarky comedian I heard recently said that we should stop talking about type 1 and type 2 diabetes. She said we should call it pretty much not my fault diabetes and, yeah, pretty much my fault diabetes. Although poverty causes people to eat bad foods, but for people like me, I could afford to eat better, but I eat in a hurry, I eat fast foods, I eat out of boredom and out of stress, and that tends to be stuff that you open a bag to eat, all of which kills us. This chart shows the growth of type 2 diabetes in our nation over the past 60 years. As our nation has become more wealthy, as we've even had better healthcare sciences, still the rate of diabetes in adults has gone from 0.5% to almost 10%. Now that's not natural. In fact, it's specifically unnatural. This is a result of our choosing to poison ourselves. It's the direct product of eating bad foods and too much of them. And some of that is because the government subsidizes those foods, and that's what's available to us. Asia, for example, had almost no instances of obesity or diabetes or heart disease until the last 30 years. And in the last 30 years, we have exported Kentucky Fried Chicken, Pizza Hut, and McDonald's. The British tried to kill Asians with opium a century ago. then we leaned on them pretty hard with Philip Morris tobacco products. But it looks like the real villains in Asia are Colonel Sanders and Ronald McDonald. Just as capitalism has not been a friendly force in healthcare, it possibly is even a worse nightmare in determining what we eat. There's a very powerful influence of the marketplace on our politics, and both of them seem to exercise power over our food supply. I was approached several years ago by one of the founding members of the Jesus Seminar who asked me to write a book with him about the politics of food in the New Testament. The project never made it into print, but I spent years thinking about this one very odd New Testament story that's found both in Mark and in Matthew about a birthday party for King Herod. Now, I can never really get satisfied in myself whether the writers of the Gospels were such brilliant writers that they invented these metaphors that were so powerful, or if in fact it's purely accidental, just bubbling up out of their unconscious, that they tell their stories in a way that tells so much more than what lies on the surface. The story about King Herod's birthday party is full of images and metaphors about power and about poverty. There was a lot of palace intrigue in the messed up family history of marriages in Herod's family, but Herod's wife had a daughter from a previous marriage, and she had her dance for Herod when he was good and drunk at this party. The implication being that the dance was very sexy, and the drunken king was put off his guard, and he leans forward and offers to give Herodias anything she asks for, up to half of his kingdom. Her mother then whispers in her ear, telling her to ask for the head of the imprisoned prophet John the Baptist. But again, reading the text from Mark chapter 6 very closely, the girl's mother tells her to ask for the head of John the Baptist. But the girl in the very next sentence goes before the king and says very specifically, I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter. So they're at a party. What's brought out on a platter? Food, right? Food. To impress the guests, these beautiful arrays of food. So she wants to serve the head of John the Baptist to impress all of these powerful guests. Now, forgive me for being so graphic. While you may think of King David presenting the head of the Philistine warrior Goliath by holding up his hair, or the ancient practice of putting the heads of criminals or national enemies on a spike in public, but a head on a platter, that's different. And I can't let go of the apparent metaphor that while the young girl was being treated as an object of lust, even still, she was a member of the royal family, and she could treat the poor and the vulnerable the way you and I treat a plate of French fries. Not literally, but certainly figuratively, economically, politically. The rich have always eaten the poor. In 1729, during the potato famine in Ireland, Jonathan Swift wrote a satirical piece that he called A Modest Proposal, which was the basis of the song that Sean just sang. Swift suggested that the poor Irish sell their babies as food to the well-heeled English. Swift intended to shame the English into treating the Irish, who were starving, better. Historically, shame never works to persuade the rich to care about the poor. You could wish in our 21st century era that farmers would just decide that they're going to throw profits to the wind and only grow healthy foods in an organic way. But as much as farming is a cultural lifestyle, it isn't a hobby. This is how people are making a living. So they have to grow what is profitable. The whole reason that we have a federal government with a tax system and departments that hand out subsidies is in order to manage desirable outcomes. The problem is, with our system of government, Herod keeps lustily leaning towards Herodias' bare bosom and telling her that she can have whatever she wants. And as long as we keep telling corporations that they can have whatever they want, they're going to want to grow the crops that they can grow in thousands and thousands of acres without much labor, using gasoline-powered farm equipment to grow it. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, need to give voice to what the poor need to be saying before the axe is laid to their necks. We can't do it all at once. I understand that. You don't want to just turn the economic apple cart upside down, but we know where we need to go. And we should be making changes in every year's budget. A federal budget is a moral document. And the document that has less than 1% growing healthy foods and 99% growing stuff that will kill you is an immoral document. So we need to shrink the subsidies of meat, dairy, rice, corn, soy, sugar, potatoes, and wheat, and we need to start subsidizing green vegetables and fruits and other organically grown foods. And yes, that will probably make foods more expensive, but it will lower our medical bills. And in the end, it will be much cheaper for all of us, as well as making us more healthy and giving us longer lives. Our politicians, because they owe their jobs to the donations from lobbyists, cannot tear their eyes off of the enchanting naked body of Herodias. We need to help her to put her damn shirt back on and go sit down. Our government must work for us, and right now they are poisoning us, and that has to stop. But folks, you know they will not do it on their own. They will only do it if we insist on it, and the only way we can insist on it is either at the ballot box or in the streets. But either way, allowing politics and profit to set our dinner table for us so that we continually are eating the poor, that, my friends, has to stop. Thanks.
Them that's got shall get, them that's not shall lose. So the Bible said, and it still is news. Mama may have, Papa may have. God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Yes, the strong get more while the weak ones fade. Empty pockets that don't make the grade. Mama may have, Papa may have. God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Money, you got lots of friends crowded around your door. But when it's gone and the spending ends, they don't come around no more. No. Rich relations give crust of bread and such. You can help yourself, but don't take too much, no. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless a child that's got his own, that's got his own.
Roger has reminded us today and called us into account that we can't separate our food systems from wider issues of justice. We farm on land stolen and conquered from indigenous people. We farm with labor that's often dependent on exploiting people, especially immigrants. We farm with methods that exploit and harm the earth, destroying ecosystems. We process and distribute food in ways that have resulted in the decline of food sovereignty and a paucity of access to good, healthy food. The more we look at our food system, the more we understand that food justice can't be separated from climate justice or racial justice or economic justice and more. Regenerative agriculture is a key to regenerative community. And as Roger showed us, our well-being is at stake, both personally and as a society. What we eat, how we eat matters. How we transform our food systems matters. And this is one of the most joyful and celebratory ways that we could even think to change the world, isn't it? I mean, who doesn't love food and good food? And what a powerful message for us to take into the world with us. Everyone deserves to eat healthy, delicious food. That's something we can get behind, isn't it? That's something we can commit to supporting to day in and day out. That's the kind of message that we can take with us. So as we go in peace to love and to serve.